Boy, talk about timing.
Welcome to the What Really Happened radio show.
So sorry. Anyway,
I know it's bad equipment here and everything.
Here we go.
All right.
So, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Tuesday, November 24th, 2015. And for those people who signed in early on BAM User, was a little bit interesting. We're dealing with technical issues. And part of that, of course, is we're running on very old equipment that is desperately in need of replacement. And especially here in Hawaii with all the salt air. Everything that you buy behaves like it's made out of compressed rust and starts dissolving almost immediately in the salt air. Anyway, we're back on the air. Everybody's hearing us. It is Tuesday, November 24th, 2015. We've got lots of stuff to talk about. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645, 877-300-7645. And yes, for those of you trying to reach my website, last night we were hit with a massive denial of service attack. And we trapped all the offending IPs, and surprise, 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 they were all coming from Amazon.com. I wonder if we said something yesterday that Amazon didn't like, because they were definitely piling onto us. Quick program note, our third hour guest today is going to be Tony Rook. He is the producer, filmmaker of a new 9/11 documentary, Incontrovertible. We have a link to the website where you can purchase that disc on the front page of WhatReallyHappened.com right now, so we'll be talking to him in the third hour. Obviously, the big story now is that earlier today, Turkey shot down a Russian warplane near the Syria border. And there's a great deal of argument if the Russian plane was in Syrian airspace or not. And part of the confusion has to do with the fact that Syria kind of arbitrarily expanded their borders for a security buffer zone. They basically padded 5 miles onto their internationally recognized border. And supposedly, Russia and Turkey were coordinating militarily, but Turkey basically got up there and said, you violated our airspace. We gave you 10 warnings, we shot you down. Now, even going with Turkey's description of the aircraft's path, the aircraft violated Turkish security buffer, not the actual border, for 10 seconds. How do you shout 10 warnings to an airplane in just 10 seconds time? You know, get out, boom, and they shoot them down. Putin is, needless to say, very, very angry, warning of serious consequences. Turkey is out there saying, well, you were violating our airspace. Actually, Russia was not attacking Turkey. It's ridiculous. Russia has been targeting the U.S.-backed terrorists in Syria who are trying to remove the elected president, Bashar al-Assad, and replace him with the U.S. puppet. And Russia has come on into Syria at the request of the legitimate Syrian government, and they have accomplished more against ISIS, Al-Qaeda, al-Nusra in the space of a month than the United States pretended to do for the entire preceding year. And here's the kicker. In order to pursue and shoot down the Russian plane, Turkey violated Syria's airspace by 4 kilometers, shot the Russian plane down, and then skedaddled back over the border. But of course, this is all being spun that, oh, this was Russia's fault. If Russia wasn't there in Syria, this never would have happened. It's all Putin's fault. Russia should just go home and leave Syria to the United States of America because we know what we're doing. We want Assad out and the U.S. puppet in. So basically, everybody is very upset about this. NATO's convening an emergency meeting to deal with this new Russian crisis. It wasn't a Russian crisis until Turkey shot their plane down. Went after it with a pair of F-16s. The Russian plane was unescorted. Probably came as a complete shock that our supposed allies in the war against ISIS were shooting at them. But the net result is, it is now obvious to the world, Turkey supports the terrorist groups inside Syria, shot Russia in the back, wasn't expecting it, no declared state of war, because Russia was bombing the U.S. and Turkish-backed terrorists inside Syria. Now, Putin's already made a public statement, and he's made a valid point, in theory at least. Turkey is supposed to be against the terrorists, not protecting them from Russian planes. We know that Turkey has been supplying ISIS and providing safe passage across the Syrian border, as well as safe havens inside Turkey that ISIS skedaddles to and hides out when the Syrian army gets too close. Turkey shot down the Russian plane on the flimsiest of pretexts. And pretty much everybody in the independent media is saying exactly the same thing over at Sputnik News. Turkey raising the black flag of ISIS by shooting down the Russian plane. Patrick Hennigan over on Russia Today. Turkey protects terrorists on the ground. That's exactly what they were doing. And apparently adding insult to injury when the Russian crew ejected from their destroyed aircraft, forces on the ground were firing at them as they came down on the parachute. Now, there's a little bit of confusion as to what exactly happened. There was a video that came out earlier showing 2 parachutes coming down, people on the ground shooting at them. The report is one Russian was killed, the other one was captured. Another report says both were killed. Then there was a new video just went up that has everybody's head scratching because it shows only one parachute coming down, being shot at, and that parachute is red. So clearly it's not the same incident. Somebody's putting this stuff out for propaganda purposes. Now, apparently a month ago, there was a Turkish blogger who went public. Fout Avni came out saying Erdogan wanted to shoot down a Russian plane to provoke a conflict with Russia. And Paul Craig Roberts is out there saying there is no way Turkey would do something this provocative without the permission of Washington, D.C. to try and get the war with Russia going. That's the game they're playing. We're going to grab ourselves a phone call. Dustin in New Jersey, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Just like the Ukrainians couldn't get the permission without asking Victoria Nuland. Look, we all know where this is going, Mike, because,
yeah.
I mean, how many more times is this going to have to happen to the Russians until they start taking the gloves off? You know, I think they got to re-annex that part that Turkey took and just wipe out those the Turkish small minority terrorist group in that area, the 5 miles they took. They got to wipe them out.
Well,
because
you see, actually, Turkey did issue a warning to Russia only a few weeks ago to not attack the Turkmen tribes in Syria near the Turkish border, saying, "Don't you bomb those people? Those are our people. We will come after you." Which apparently is what happened. But those Turkmen in Syria are part of the so-called moderate terrorists. They're supplied by the CIA, and that's where this all came from. But the big
it's going toward a world war, Mike, because they want these terrorists to straw them into Europe and then into the Caucasus, and this is where it's headed, and Russia's not getting out of there. So, you know, I mean, this is like a NATO, U.S., Britain, the whole group is just, they're not going to back down. They're not going to back down, Mike, and then Russia's not going to back down. So this is where it's headed.
Yeah.
I hate to say it. I mean, because, you know, like I said, they're going to bring the terrorists into Europe, spread them out into the Caucasus, just like in Dagestan with the Sarnal brother over here. Went back and forth, just like the other guys going into France, back and forth. They were letting them go back and forth. I mean, this is ridiculous.
It is.
So we all know where it is headed.
Well, I've been saying for months here, ultimately World War III is about whose brand of ink and paper we're all supposed to use for the next 100 years. It is a war between the U.S. Federal Reserve note, the Russian ruble, and the Chinese yuan. That's what is driving this whole situation forward.
But no matter what Putin does, it's not going to stop him from doing this. So he needs to take the gloves off sooner rather than later, because it's inevitable what's coming.
It is. Well, I think what Putin is going to do, Putin is not going to attack Turkey. He knows that's exactly what NATO wants, but he is taking steps to basically protect his forces in Syria from Turkish interference. They're sending one of their guided missile cruisers to the Mediterranean in order to cover that section of the border. They're apparently moving some of their amazing radar jamming equipment up to that border as well to blind the Turkish radars and the Turkish F-16s. And all bombing missions into that part of Syria will now have fighter cover. That's what they were missing. And there were apparently multiple Turkish F-16s sent up to shoot this plane down. It is clearly a provocation, an escalation by Turkey, and they're trying to spin it that this is all Russia's fault. They should just go home and mind their own gosh darn business. We'll be back after these few words. Hi, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go ahead and grab ourselves a phone call. Donna in New Mexico, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. There's some breaking news, and I missed the first few minutes of your show, so you might have covered this, but Russia's already responding to Turkish threats. It's breaking news on RT Online. Russia deploys missile cruiser off Syria coast, ordered to destroy any target posing a danger. and they've outlined a few other things that they're going to be doing. And I clearly see that the events of today, between the RT reporters being attacked by U.S.-made weapons coming from ISIS near Latakia, and this incident there, and also the Russian helicopter that was down, that these things have to be connected, and I think they're coordinated, and I think NATO knew.
Well, I think absolutely they did, shooting down, first of all, shooting at guys coming down in parachutes is a war crime. Shooting down rescue helicopters, you're not supposed to do that either. It's like shooting at the medics. That's a tacky no-no under the international rules of war. And what's complicating the issue is that apparently the terrorists on the ground in Syria used a U.S.-supplied missile to shoot down the Mi-8 rescue helicopter. Now, it suffered damage. One of the crew was killed, but they did make it to a neutral zone, and they've been evacuated. But yeah, this is clearly a provocation to try and get Russia to do something. Now, in addition to the guided missile cruiser sailing into position, Russia is also reportedly deploying some of their very powerful radar jamming equipment to that part of Syria in order to basically blind Turkey and NATO, so that they're not going to start coming after their people. But yeah, I got an email from somebody whose father was involved in wargaming. And every time they were talking about the start of World War III, Turkey was always being picked as the flashpoint. And it looks like that's the plan that's moving ahead.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Do you think that President Hollande's little tete-a-tete today in Washington, the timing of that's pretty suspicious, I would think. The statements that they made, and again, using the same language, Assad has to go, the Russians have to cooperate, and we're running the show.
Yeah, but that's basically the message they've been saying ever since Russia went on in there. But there is an important point of international law that must be repeated over and over again. The legitimate, recognized government of Syria invited Russia to come in and help against these terrorist groups. The legitimate and recognized government of Syria has not invited either France or the United States to come on in and bomb the heck out of their economic infrastructure. And right. Even today, all these French and U.S. missions into Syria are not bombing the terrorists who we now know work for the U.S. government. They continue to destroy Syria's economic infrastructure.
I'm in agreement. That's all I had to say, and thanks for your time.
All right, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go there. Now then, Sergei Lavrov did have a scheduled visit to Turkey, and he's now canceled that. That's diplomatic speak for, we're very unhappy with you. Apparently, Russia and Turkey were supposed to be coordinating their militaries, which means Turkey knew what that plane was, where it was going, and what its mission was, and they still shot it down. Now, Russia's talking about a ban of all flights from Russia to Turkey from here on out. One of the major tour operators in Russia, Natali Tours, has canceled all their Turkish packages as of right now. And, of course, complicating the issue is that terrorist forces in Syria tried to shoot down the rescue helicopters coming for those Russian pilots. Obviously, this is a provocation. Now, here's a bizarre story that came out just before we went to airtime. This was being reported at yahoo.com. And this is coming from the Turkish government saying that the two pilots from the downed Russian plane are in fact alive, and Turkey is mounting a rescue mission to get them or capture them, which is going to be rather tricky because Turkey does not have legal authority to cross into Syria under any circumstances whatsoever. These are Russian pilots, not Turkish pilots. The only reason for Turkey to risk complicating the issue to get these pilots is to put them on display and say, see, these Russian pilots, they were killing our friends in Syria, ISIS and Al-Qaeda. We can't have that. And they're really raising on a busted flush with the propaganda. Barack Obama literally came out with the statement, Turkey has the right to defend itself and its airspace. And I think at this point, Obama has crossed into the meaning of the 25th Amendment. Russia was not attacking Turkey. In theory, both Turkey and Russia are on the same side against the terrorists in Syria, which is what Russia was bombing. And Obama's trying to, the spin is, this is all Russia's fault. They should have stayed at home and left rulership of the world to the United States of America, and we're still in charge. And let's be honest, after going on 5 years of trying to get Bashar al-Assad, the U.S. is still in thrash mode. They're thrashing around Iraq. They're thrashing around Yemen. They're thrashing around Libya. They can't hang on to their conquered provinces. Paul Craig Roberts came out with the story. Turkey has destroyed Russia's hope of Western cooperation. And according to Paul Craig Roberts, this attack had to be cleared by Washington, D.C. Turkey's government isn't very good, but even dummies know better than to get themselves into the position of going against Russia all by themselves. So the government of Turkey was told, kick this thing off. NATO and the U.S., well, U.S. is part of NATO. NATO is going to come in on your side. And they're going to crank up this war. Because they need this war to distract you all from the coming economic crash. They need a scapegoat. Politicians, as a class of human being, will not accept responsibility for their mistakes. They're always going to look for a scapegoat, somebody to blame, and that's going to be Russia and China. Oh, the recovery was underway. We were just on the verge of getting the economy to light up like a Christmas tree. I'm sorry, that's not politically correct. Like a Hanukkah bush. But those gosh darn Russians and Chinese, they just ruined it for everybody. And the U.S. government has done this twice before. Every time they get into a self-created economic crisis, they get out of it by getting involved in a world war. Crash of 1907, World War I. Crash of 1929, World War II. Crash of 2008, look how many countries the United States has invaded, overthrown, drone-struck. It is clear who the aggressor is in this new world war. And it's not the Russians, and it's not the Chinese. And remember, since the dawn of the industrial age, every war, every major war, has been lost by the nation that initiated it. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, also going on, there was a hostage crisis reported in a northern French town. Some people have been wounded. French town of Roubaix, I think it's pronounced. And, of course, everybody's out there, oh, Paris, terrorists, Paris. According to the latest report from the police, it appears to have been a bank robbery that went wrong. So that one's already fading off the news cycle, because it doesn't matter if people are dead or wounded or taken hostage. If it doesn't support the terror meme, it's just not worth it at all. Now, we're already seeing the beginning of massive censorship to try and control what people know. And there's a very interesting article over at Russia Insider, and it's talking about the propaganda inside the United States leading to the shutting down of Russia Today. Apparently over at the Washington Post, Kramer, who works for John McCain's Institute for International Leadership, has gone on this anti-Russia vitriol and saying that the U.S. government ought to freeze the assets of any media that is not sympathetic to the U.S. point of view. So they're scared. They're finally waking up to the fact they cannot lie to the American people with impunity. They have not been able to drag us back to the glory days of the 1950s where they could wag commies at us and we would obediently wet ourselves and fling our money and our babies onto the designated enemy's bayonets. Those days are gone forever. Remember what I said about Sun Tzu. If your army and your people do not believe in the moral rightness of the war, you will lose. Meanwhile, in the Italian media, they're singing Vladimir Putin's praises for the way he's dealing with ISIS. So bits and pieces of Europe are starting to flake away from this whole let's go to war with Russia. They're saying Russia's doing the thing right here. All right, let's grab ourselves a phone call. John in Barbados, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. Yeah, I'm looking at this Russia-Turkey-Syria situation. And I think what a lot of people are missing, Turkey does a lot of business with Russia. And one of the things that's going to happen first is that it's going to lose an enormous part of its economy in the tourism industry. Turkey is one of the favorite destinations for many Europeans, and that's going to fade away.
Oh, it's a beautiful place. I mean, there's a lot of rich history there, and it was up until recently on my bucket list. But that's not going to happen, you know, and you're right. They're going to take a major hit on their tourism industry. They're already shutting off all tourism from Russia into Turkey. And with all the stuff that's going on over there, I think, you know, you've got the U.S. State Department is now issuing a warning to Americans, don't travel anywhere. Everybody hates you. The terrorists are everywhere. Stay at home, hide under your bed, do as you're told.
The other thing, of course, is they can kiss goodbye to that pipeline project. I'm sure it's now permanently on hold.
I would agree with that.
And, of course, what I'm seeing as well is that I don't think Vladimir Putin is going to take military action. I think he'll take action to protect his assets in Syria, but not actually attack Turkey.
I agree, and unfortunately everybody is going in, you know, for the obvious joke here about Putin is going to roast Turkey for Thanksgiving. No, Putin's not going to do that, and I'm sure that Putin has been considering for a very, very long time what would happen the first time a Russian plane got shot down. And so I don't think he was taken by surprise. Looking at his face when he was talking about that during his meeting with the King of Jordan, he wasn't taken by surprise. He's maintaining the calm, high road, but I could tell in his eyes he's very angry.
The other thing I believe will happen is that eventually Russia is going to look at what's happening with this NATO nonsense, realize that this was a NATO objective to shoot a Russian airplane down, and I think they will say to NATO, no more aircraft over Syria. Keep your aircraft out. If you come in, we're going to shoot you down.
Well, that would be up for the Syrian government to say, not Russia. But you're right, the Syrian government may say, I mean, because let's be very honest, everybody's screaming about Russia violated Syria's security extended buffer for 10 whole seconds. Turkey violated Syrian airspace, sending those F-16s deep into Syria to shoot that Russian plane down, and we just lost our GC and... No, I heard a strange sound. Are we still connected?
I believe so. I can still hear you.
All right. We've got weird equipment, weird stuff happening on the on the line today. Anyway, yeah, it's up to Syria to say you may not enter our airspace anymore. Of course, the U.S. is going to ignore it. The U.S. has been bombing Syria without Syria's permission for 4 years now. This is an undeclared war. And the revelation that the U.S. was backing all these very terrorist groups, the U.S. is now having to tacitly admit the real agenda is kicking out the elected president Bashar al-Assad and putting in a U.S. puppet ruler, just like they did in Iran in 1953, in Chile in 1973, in Ukraine in 2014, and some 40 other times since the end of World War II.
Well, I think all these U.S. puppets are beginning to fragment and move away from the U.S.
It's just like the fall of the Roman Empire. When the Roman legions could no longer police the extent of the empire, the provinces on the fringe began to break away, the tax revenues dried up, and Rome began to collapse under its debt. And that's exactly what's going to happen to the United States of America.
Well, I mean, I'm not so much interested at the moment in what the military consequences of this strike are. It's the economic consequences, and I think Russia now is in a position to really hammer Europe and Turkey with its own sanctions. So this is not going to be a win for NATO.
No, everybody loses in these wars except the bankers. I mean, that's an historical absolute. Even the people on the winning side of the war suffer losses and hardship and privation. And they're expected to ignore all that and look at the flag and feel really good about themselves because they're on the winning side. But I need to put back up that article I wrote, Majestic Memories, about the Jim Carrey movie, because I grew up in a town. I was born, a few years after World War II was over, but still early enough where the town I grew up in was still feeling the losses and the pain from World War II, and we were supposed to be on the winning side. Only the politicians and the bankers actually win the wars. Everybody else loses. It's just a question of who loses more than the others. And obviously the losing side suffers more than the winning side, but all sides suffer in war.
Well, the other thing I wanted to mention, Michael, is this martial law type thing that's taking hold in France. Apparently, nobody is really taking any notice of it. There's been huge demonstrations against various actions. So people are going onto the streets regardless.
Oh, absolutely. France is now blocking WhatReallyHappened.com. I found this search engine that goes out and pings your site from 90 places around the world, and sure enough, WhatReallyHappened.com is now invisible inside France.
Well, there you go. I mean, they can't take the truth.
No,
That's
they can't.
The problem.
You can't. To habitual liars, truth is a hate crime. Okay?
Yeah. Anyway, I just thought I'd mention those few subjects, Michael. Carry on with the show, and I'll be listening.
All right. Thank you very much for the phone call here. We got another caller waiting on the line, but I don't have enough time to start you. Coming up on another commercial break, we're going to take your call as soon as we come back from these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, story we just posted to WhatReallyHappened.com is a flashback to 2012 and an incident where Syria shot down a Turkish airplane that had crossed into Syrian airspace. And President Erdogan said, and I quote, "A short-term border violation can never be a pretext for an attack." Turkey claimed that the aircraft was on a training mission. They were testing Turkey's radar in the eastern Mediterranean. So it's a little bit of a double standard. It's okay for Turkey to fly into Syrian airspace, and, that shouldn't be a pretext for an attack. But Russia crosses into this claimed airspace buffer zone of Turkey for 10 seconds and is brought down. Little bit of hypocrisy going on there. All right, let's grab some phone calls. George in Texas, aloha. Thank you for waiting. What's on your mind?
Yeehaw from the Lone Star State.
Yeehaw.
Anyway, I've been hearing, you talk about trying to shut down Russia today, and this country, the thing is, I have a feeling, there's plenty of other avenues I think RT will probably use, besides, to get the news out. And, hearing about what Matt Trudeau's saying, there's the votes in the Supreme Court to shut down free speech using copyright laws. Well, I remember back in 2000 when they had the McCain-Feingold bill, campaign finance reform, saying that the Supreme Court upheld that they'd be able to shut down free speech of opposing candidate 2 months before an election.
Yes. And
everybody just flat out ignored it. I think the Supreme Court tried to shut down free speech using the copyright laws. I just think people will ignore it too.
Well, I'll tell you what's going to happen. The independent media will just go to producing their own original content. And we'll copyright it and tell the corporate media you can no longer borrow and use our material, because it's like the corporate media has declared open season on anything they find on the independent blogs. They'll just help themselves. They've been caught just stealing without attribution from all of the independent media, and it's been open season. And I think it would be a good thing. I think it's our next obvious step of evolution of the independent media to really start producing more of our own internal content. The reason they want to use the copyright laws is so that we cannot link to their websites to point out where they lied to things, like that March 20th, 2000 article in the UK Independent, snowfalls are a thing of the past. Everybody who was questioning human-caused global warming linked to that. Now they've simply taken the article off the server, but that's what they really want to do. They don't want us able to go and link to the actual corporate media and hold them to what they write there.
Well, I just think, it's openly blatant that Washington wants to shut down free speech, and, they're really showing their hand, and I just really think, if they try to shut down free speech, there's going to be a real pushback.
There really will be, because, the American people have been very quiet and very patient as our Bill of Rights get whittled away, but we are all raised to literally worship the idea that we have freedom of speech and opinion in this country, and it is very obvious. It is under attack, certainly by Israel, on all of our college campuses. And now, again, they want to find a way to say, well, you really have free speech, you just can't do this anymore. And, you know, free speech is like virginity. It either is or it isn't. And if you have freedom of speech to say what the government allows you to say, that's not freedom of speech, that's permitted speech. And that is tyranny and dictatorship.
Well, like I say, they can't handle the truth when it's working against them.
They never could handle the truth. That's why they lie all the time. They survive by lies, fraud, and deception. And the American people need to wake up and realize that, whether it's the Gulf of Tonkin, the USS Maine, the Lusitania, Pearl Harbor, Saddam's nuclear weapons, 9/11, our government can't operate unless it has the ability, the power, to lie to the public with impunity, and we have taken that away from them. And that's why we're probably not going to get any Christmas cards from the White House this year.
Well, I really don't want any Christmas cards from the White House.
Oh, I send them one every year. I send them one every year. They ignore them. All righty. Thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go and switch over to Glenn. Glenn, I'm sorry. I hit the wrong button. Glenn, please call back in again. And we're going to go to Frank in London. Aloha, Frank. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. It's just I want to touch on what occurred in the Turkey, not in Turkey, in Syria today. With the Russian plane being taken down, I see the hypocrisy of it all, and I heard Obama made a very, very lame analysis of it. This man is beginning to sound like a professional buffoon. He said that because the Russian planes were attacking moderate opposition near they violated the Turkish airspace, plus they were attacking moderate opposition. How many times doesn't he understand that people know now there are no moderate opposition in Syria? It's an insult to people's intelligence now.
Yes, it is. Everybody ought to be insulted that the government and the media thinks you are stupid enough to actually fall for this nonsense. When the Syrian government invited Russia to come in and deal with the terrorist problem, Russia made it very clear. They didn't recognize the difference between moderate terrorists and extreme terrorists. All terrorists are bad in the eyes of Russia, and they are all targets. And it doesn't matter whether you call them moderate or not. If you're shooting at Russian planes who are shooting at terrorists, then you are protecting and defending the terrorists. Period. End of discussion.
Of course. And I think now Turkey, they're the tool that are being used to push for this war, because that's a blatant provocation.
Of course it's a blatant provocation, and they're going to go on doing it. Now, again, Putin is a chess master. He is not going to take military action against Turkey directly, because Turkey would invoke Article 5 of the NATO agreement, and everybody would pile on in. And what Putin is going to do, though, is protect the assets he has in country. And when attacked, they will defend themselves. And we'll hear the media saying, how dare the Russians shoot back at us when we're shooting at them, because we have the moral right to shoot at them because they're shooting at the people we paid to overthrow the government of Syria. And you can see how ridiculous this whole propaganda campaign has become. And like I said, I talk to people around here all the time who don't know I do a radio show. They don't know I have this blog. They think I'm just this guy who comes into the dry cleaning store every once in a while. Nobody's buying any of this anymore. It has been months, 6 months, I think, since I met anybody who bought any of this nonsense coming out of the corporate media or the government.
Yeah, even the most blind system, I'm not buying this anymore, and the lies are getting worse, and I don't think these people realize how ridiculous they're beginning to look.
I don't think they care.
This is what I find very strange.
I don't think they care. I think what they're thinking is once they can get the war going any way at all, everybody will feel this sudden surge of patriotism and will say, yes, we're going to go kill the Russians. Even though the war would be wrong, we are in it. We must fight it out. We cannot retire without dishonor, which is one of the big lies that we get. Listen, Frank, I need to let you go. Thank you very much. We finally got Glenn in Pennsylvania back. I apologize for hitting the wrong button on you. We got just a couple of minutes before the top of the hour. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I think it's time for the plug to be removed from your Turkish piaster and placed squarely in Erdogan's mouth or some other convenient orifice to prevent what's coming out of him.
Yes, you could fertilize the desert with it.
After all.
Yeah, you could fertilize the whole desert with his mouth.
Yeah, exactly. So obviously, since what's coming from them is not good, we should make efforts to repress it.
Well, again, what we need to do, and I'm going to do a graphic on this, we need to hammer home the point that back in 2012, when Turkey flew a plane into Syria and it was shot down, Erdogan's opinion was, a brief border incursion is not justification for an attack. And yet look what they did to the Russian plane today. It's a double standard. And if we show that hypocrisy to the world, everybody will understand this is Turkey trying to kick up a war with Russia for the benefit of NATO.
Not a terribly... Gee, you would think they might be smart enough to think that they were being used in that regard, wouldn't you?
I'm sure they are, but they're very well paid to be used like that. That's what it's all about. Doesn't matter who wins or loses, they'll all retire wealthy after it's all over, assuming they're still alive. Anyway, listen, Glenn, I'm sorry to cut you off, but we got to take our top of the hour news break and commercials, and we'll be back with hour number 2 after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2 here, and the phone lines are open, 877-300-7645, and we're going to go ahead and take another phone call from Brad in Pennsylvania. Aloha. I assume you have something more to share with us.
Yes. Not only was the plane shot down, but because the Free Syrian Army just put out a video showing 2 Russian helicopters going to apparently rescue the downed pilot, and one of them was blown up by a U.S. TOW missile, and one Russian Marine was killed. And it just seems to me that this is all just spiraling out of control, Mike. And they got, well, if I can make one more prediction, if that'd be okay.
Sure.
This Paris attack thing, it really about terrorism and everything. Remember, they were already cracking down on political dissent really, really hard over there before this. And it seems to me that I think this is why they did it, because, Russia is beating them pretty bad. And, being a Russian pilot he probably saw something in Turkey. The whole reason probably he went in there.
Well, I imagine that the flight crew of the Russian plane were not expecting Turkish aircraft to shoot them down. I mean, Russia is still maintaining that the Russian plane was on the Syrian side of the internationally recognized border between the two nations. Turkey is out there screaming that they had extended their border 5 miles into Syria for security reasons, and that is the border the Russian plane supposedly violated. And even the Turkish government is saying the violation lasted only 17 seconds. And
it did.
And again, we need to underscore the double standard on display here, because back in 2012, a Turkish aircraft went deep into Syrian territory and was shot down. And Erdogan's response at that point was, a simple border violation does not justify an attack. And yet today, 17 seconds across the line on the map, and boom, you're dead.
And you know what? Here was I was thinking, Mike. What do you think the Russian people are thinking about the West, and especially America, seeing those videos of, not only their airplane being shot down by a Turkish F-16, but their 2 pilots being shot at by Free Syrian, or supposed, whatever you call them, while they're parachuting down, and not only being shot at, but having one of their rescue helicopters being blown up by another U.S.
I'm sure they feel the same way that I feel, absolutely appalled at what's going on here. And remember, let's get back to the real world here. 95% of the Free Syria Army are not Syrian. They are hired mercenaries brought in from other countries. You know that $3 trillion that vanished without trace from the Pentagon? I think we're seeing where it's being spent. And they couldn't admit they were spending it to hire mercenaries to overthrow other countries. That's why Rumsfeld got up there on September 10th, 2001, and said, well, we've just lost all this money. I have no idea where it went here. And then, of course, the next day 9/11 happened, and the corporate media forgot all about the missing trillions in the Pentagon budget. And this is where it's being spent.
Do you think they have something more? Do you think they have, do you think they have something more? Because like you said, it's $3 trillion, and And then, you know, if their main
I mean, obviously, up until recently, all of this funding and arming of these terrorist groups was very much off the books in the United States. The U.S. government was hiding that from the American people. Now they can't hide it any longer. That money came from someplace. You know, it just had to vanish mysteriously so they could spend it in ways that were unaccountable and not subject to review by Congress, invisible to the media. And I'm sure a lot of that money just vanished into private pockets. But that seems to be the cash source for all of these hired terrorist mercenaries all over the Middle East working on behalf of the United States.
Mm-hmm. It's just that video, Mike. I mean, if you just saw how when they played the videos of our troops being killed in Iraq and how furious we got, you know, what we would do, I just hope that, you know, it seems like they're like building their hatred up, and they're it's like somebody's pitting the two against each other, and somebody's playing the middle. You know what I mean?
Well, you know, there's one more point, and then I got to let you go here. Okay. There is actually an article in the Geneva Conventions that you are not supposed to take photos or movies or videos of captured or killed prisoners in a way that would degrade or humiliate them, and yet that's what the U.S. allied moderate terrorists in Syria just did with these videos of the one dead Russian pilot. So they're already in violation of the Geneva Accords.
Okay, Mike. Well, you have a good one. You take it easy.
All right. Thank you very much. We're going to let you go. Now, getting on back to more news here. One thing Vladimir Putin has done to express his displeasure with the United States is he's now lifted the Russian export ban on uranium enrichment equipment to Iran. So Iran is now going to get, if they want it, equipment to enrich uranium. Now, Iran has the right, even under the P5+1, to enrich uranium to the level required for their nuclear power plant, which is nowhere near the degree of enrichment required to build a nuclear weapon. One of the big lies you have been told about Iran is that they can take their enrichment system that makes nuclear reactor fuel rods, flip it from chopped to puree, and instantly have bomb stuff. It doesn't work like that. Reactor fuel is enriched to about 12%. To make a bomb, you have to enrich to 95, 96%. And that takes a considerably larger facility. It's not something you can do with a facility that makes reactor fuel rods. Plus, under the P5+1 deal and under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, Iran is allowing full IAEA access to all their facilities to keep watch. Iran's playing by the rules. The U.S. government is not. Now then, do you remember when the Paris attack first happened? Fox News came out with this report to establish that this was ISIS at the Bataclan Theater, that one of the terrorists had been arrested at the theater and told police, "I am from ISIS. Allah Akbar, I'm from Syria." And it was picked up all over the web. But the official police record was that nobody was arrested at the Bataclan Theater. They were all killed, in place, in position. So Fox News was just making this up to tell you who to blame when the Paris terror attack went down. They're from ISIS. They're from Syria. And then, of course, it came out that all of the named suspects had European Union passports. They lived there. Now, there's this Muslim woman from Morocco, Nabila Bakatha, whose picture was used by the corporate media to be Hasna Ait Balachen, the female suicide bomber associated with the Paris attacks, who turned out not to be an actual suicide bomber. They grabbed the wrong picture and they just ran with it. Anything that supports dangerous Muslim terrorists. I loved how Francois Hollande today was out there saying, you can't object to the Syrian refugees. It's a completely separate thing from the war on terror. And it's absolutely absurd because the idea is when you open the borders, terrorists can come into your country pretending to be Syrian refugees. Nobody's checking these people. You are more thoroughly checked for your background to buy a firearm in the United States than all of these Mexicans and Nicaraguans and Syrians and Africans who are being allowed into the country. They're just walking on in. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And before we go back to the phone lines, a couple of emails came in. One is from another listener we have in Barbados who says hello to John and points out it really gets very simple. Anybody with guns and bombs that is killing people is not a moderate. End of discussion on that one. I got another email saying that, in point of fact, WhatReallyHappened.com is visible in France. You just have to work at it, which is good news. Vive la liberté, as it were. All right, we're going to go back to the phones. I'm going to punch the correct button this time, and we're going to talk to James in Florida. Aloha, James. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, how's it going, guys? I'm sitting here and I'm trying to explain to my Republican friends what's really going on as far as, you know, how we've been, Rand Paul has gone on the Senate floor and fully exposed that we're funding ISIS or whatever you want to call them. They all fly the black flag and they all hate us, but we're so obsessed with taking out Assad, just like we did Gaddafi, Saddam, whatever. And every time we take them out, who takes over? Muslim Brotherhood takes over, and the people of Libya had to rise up and finally throw them in jail or whatever. But every single time, it's like the media just pushes that Russia's so horrible. Well, Russia's been an ally somewhat of ours since Reagan's been in office, and, you know, we're willing to start World War III and go to war with a nuclear power state over Assad being in power. And by the way,
No. That's not what we're willing to go to war with Russia. And Russia stopped being our ally on the day Vladimir Putin took control of Russia's central bank in order to manage Russia's economy for the benefit of Russia and the Russian people. That was the day that Russia went on the U.S. government's special high-interest targets list. Assad is not the ultimate goal of the military action. General Wesley Clark blew the lid off of this all the way back in 2003, that the U.S. government was embarking on an agenda to conquer all the resource-rich areas of the Middle East and shackle them permanently to the U.S. dollar so that nations around the world would have to come and get those dollars, either at loans at interest or bringing us manufactured goods and produce to get those little ink and paper tickets with which to buy the oil they needed. That's called the petrodollar arrangement, and that was put into place after Richard Nixon ended gold convertibility for the U.S. Federal Reserve note. That's the ultimate goal. This is a war between the U.S. Federal Reserve note, the ruble, and the yuan. Assad is merely a stepping stone, and once they get him, they're going to go after Iran.
I agree, and that Iran deal was just a way for them to abuse it and then declare war on Iran. I see exactly what you're saying, but the media is just, they're pushing it so hard, and, you know, and I just wish, I'm hoping that this really gets exposed. If you look at Drudge Report, it's all over Drudge Report that, you know, these people were using American-made guns,
yes,
and these were people funded by America. So hopefully this will wake up something that we all knew for years. You know, it's really, I'm hoping that this wakes us up, but at the same time, what is Russia going to do to retaliate? That's the question everybody's wondering.
Russia is not going to retaliate. Putin is too clever for that. He understands how desperate the United States is to get a truly global war going. What Putin is going to do, and Russia said this was their goal years ago, that if the United States went into Syria and or Iran, Russia's strategy was to trap the United States in a new Vietnam and wear them down in a war of attrition. And Russia can do it, because the United States has been waging war across the globe for 13 years now. The stockpiles are drawn down. The weapons are all worn out. The new weapons being built are costly junk. The military is demoralized. The American people are tired of war. Nobody believes any of these wars have any foundation in international law or morality. And that's exactly what's going to happen. The U.S. and Russia and NATO are going to have a proxy war in Syria and Iran, and I feel sorry for the Syrians and the Iranian people, and the U.S. is going to lose it. And unfortunately, my concern is on the day when the U.S. realizes they cannot prevail conventionally, that's when they're going to uncork those nuclear weapons.
I agree. I really like your show, man. This is great. And just anyone that's listening, please try to explain to your friends what's really going on, because the media is just trying to push it as Russia was in the wrong, blah, blah, whatever. It doesn't matter. The problem is that we're funding these people, and that has to be fully exposed, because this is a way we could bring these people down, in my opinion. I mean, I feel like if Americans knew what was really going on, that we would bring it down. We could stop it and we could change it. And this may be a blessing in disguise, but, I don't know. I just hope that people really wake up.
I don't think the American people need to do anything other than sit back, have some popcorn and a soft drink and just watch the show, because the American system is pulling itself down. The economy is on the verge of collapse. Everybody knows they're trying to get a global war going to blame it all on. And we're literally in a race between a war that could go nuclear and an economic crash, and we're going to get the crash anyway, war or not. And, there are some very dark times on the horizon, but I am still convinced that ultimately the United States government is going to collapse the way the former Soviet Union did and follow that failed system into the trash bin of history. And we, the American people, need to be ready to stand up and decide for ourselves what the new nation and the new government will be, and not wait for some carpetbagger to come on in here and start up private central banking all over again, start that whole horrible, deadly cycle all over again.
I agree, and I can see what you're saying. I see what you're saying, and I agree. I mean, either way, you can just see it's not doing good, and it's going to continue to get worse.
No, this was all supposed to be over in 2008, according to Wesley Clark. Anyway, James, I need to let you go. The phone lines are really loading up here, and we're going to take a call from Rob in Minnesota. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah. Hey, Mike, doing a great job again. I hope you and Claire and all your listeners have a happy Thanksgiving Day here, and take some time off and enjoy your family and friends. Anyway, yeah, I just wanted to call about, about these airplanes coming down. We, as Americans, have a tendency to always look at the world from our perspective, and we have to start, realizing that, the Russian people have already gone through the collapse, and, they don't want to get involved in another war. And so these false flags are directed at them. They aren't directed at us. They're directed at trying to get the Russian people riled up.
Well, certainly that's what the attack on the Russian plane is. But the terror attacks, the false flag attacks in Europe and the United States are all designed to terrorize the American people into dependence on government authority. And it's really not working, because they have played that trick so many times, people understand that's what's going on.
Our Occupy movement here has kind of faded to almost non-existence. I mean, it's still there on the message boards and that, but Europe still has, the young people that are out in the street rioting. And, Europe did experience war on their shores.
Okay, so, Rob, I need to put you on hold for 4 minutes. Got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to go back to Rob in Minnesota. Rob, it's not just the Russians who don't want to fight another world war. The Nazis got really close to Moscow during the last one. It's also the European people. They don't want another world war. Their landscape is still covered with the scars from the last two. There are places in France where you can still see the remains of the trenches from World War I. When I was working in Europe in the late 1980s, in Germany and Italy, there were still places that were being repaired. There was one city block that was permanently walled off because apparently there was like this 2,000-pound bomb in there. They couldn't get at it. They couldn't defuse it. They figure it's going to blow up eventually someday, and they just walled it off. And so these are people who see the scars of the wars right before their eyes. In many ways, Americans are very naive about the reality of war. What they think they know of war is what they get from Hollywood movies. Because the last war we had on our own soil was the Civil War. And right now we're seeing a campaign to erase that across the country. Monuments, they're desecrating graves, get rid of the flag.
Well, Yeah, it's, how you started the show talking about, remembering growing up in New England and the war memory was still there. And, that's why I say we have to kind of empathize, not just think of things from American perspective, but you're right. All of Europe, remembers the wars and can easily see the scars of war. in every segment or in every group or every race of people, there's going to be a small percentage that want to go into the military and, prove how butch they are, but the rest of the people don't want to have anything to do with it. I think part of the reason that, we ended up taking out Gaddafi was because he's about ready to get that award from the UN, and, we had our Occupy protest going on strong, and if they would have figured out how good, Gaddafi was doing with Libya by just sharing the oil wealth, which is what Kennedy wanted to do by, getting rid of the oil depreciation allowance thing. All of a sudden the Occupy movement would have said, hey, how come we can't be, have the same kind of stuff that Libya has?
Well, that's been the problem all along. Every time a nation gets rid of the private central bank and their economy improves dramatically, everybody says, hey, we want that system. The United States fought the American Revolution primarily to break free of the Bank of England, which insisted on loaning the public currency into circulation at interest, enslaving us to those bankers. We fought a war to break free of that, only to be sold back into that slavery by a corrupt Congress and a corrupt president a little over 100 years ago. And that's when they stopped teaching about the Currency Act in school. That's what it's really all about. This clash of civilizations they keep talking about is a war between two banking systems. Private central banking that keeps us all debt slaves to the money junkies, and state banking which serves the nation and its people.
Oh, absolutely. And I think we got to remember Eisenhower's warning too, just because with the military-industrial complex has somehow managed to get, manufacturing facilities into every congressional district in the United States. So every congressman has, factories or industries in their district that is making money off the war. And so, if you're working in those industries, well, then the war doesn't seem like such a bad idea because I'd rather see us converting over to, live like the Jetsons in Star Trek, but, everybody else seems to think, if we didn't have the war, so, our economy would be gone. So, anyway,
well, no, it wouldn't be. There have been numerous studies showing that, in point of fact, war is not good for the whole economy. It's great for the war economy, but the costs are borne by everybody who's not involved in the war machine. And the reason we don't have the life of the Jetsons is because that would make us too independent and able to resist the oligarchs. Remember when I was talking about George Orwell and his book 1984, and there was a book within the book called The Theory and Practice of Oligarchical Collectivism. And Orwell, as part of his research to write 1984, he actually wrote out this book, which was a guide on how to keep your population poor and under control. And it says right in there, the primary purpose of war is to destroy work product, to keep the people working as hard as they can, but never allowing them to have the benefit of that work to improve their own lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks again, Mike, and have a great holiday here.
Thank you very much here. We're going to switch over to Mo in Florida. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to express myself. I kind of stay on topic this time. I just kind of wanted to get your overall impression or where you think this is going with the gold situation. We know that, when Nixon took us off the gold standard in 71, but, you kind of wonder really what's going on with $18 trillion in debt and 200 plus whatever unfunded liabilities, and the very fact that China and Russia's going their own way, it looks like. But yet, you look at the dollar and it's almost at parity with the euro. It's almost hit 100. And, sometimes I wonder if Karl Rove was right, they control reality. It's just like they're laughing. They with these incidents in what's going on with Syria and Russia and whatever, you would think in Paris, you would think gold would be 10,000 an ounce. But yet, the dollar is still king. It's still got hegemony with the rest of the world. And I guess I'm just befuddled by it. I want to get your thoughts.
Well, the goal should be 10,000 in a free and open and fair market governed by supply and demand. But we know the money junkies who are wealthy on the paper are deliberately trying to keep metal prices down because if metal prices really started to take off, people would empty those negative interest rate savings accounts, they'd buy silver and gold, and they'd take it home. And if it's not in the bank's computers, they can't play games with it. Same thing with the stock market. If gold and silver were ever shown to be potentially outperforming the equities markets, everybody would dump their stock portfolios and buy silver and gold. And they're trying to keep the price of silver and gold down to keep people in their savings accounts and in the stock market, and also as a side benefit to make the acquisition of physical gold inexpensive for these bullion depository centers like the Federal Reserve, Morgan Chase, the New York Federal Reserve Bank of France, Bank of England, who have been accepting gold on deposit from other countries and then leasing it out the back door, rehypothecating it, and now they can't return it. Remember when Germany asked for their gold back from the Bank of France and the New York Fed? And the New York Fed and the Bank of France said, oh, well, we can't give it to you now. It's going to take us several years. And then 2 weeks later, France invades Mali, which is Africa's third largest gold producer. I mean, it doesn't get more obvious than that. There is not enough gold in Fort Knox or the New York Federal Reserve or J.P. Morgan Chase or any of these other places to make good, to replace all the gold that was put there for safekeeping. It's just not there. CNBC, when this whole gold scandal first broke, actually came out with an editorial saying it doesn't matter if the gold isn't really there, because as long as we have it on paper, it's just as good and you shouldn't be complaining about it. Of course, that didn't assuage Germany's concerns. And Germany has only gotten a tiny fraction of their physical gold back. And it's not even the same bars they sent in. It's not even as pure. It's been adulterated with other metals. It's not 0.999% fine gold. It's 95% gold. And that's the real ugly secret at the heart of this whole thing. And I'm rather pleased to see that the H2 channel has been rerunning that series, America's Book of Secrets, and they're rerunning that gold conspiracy. And everything we talked about in that show has since proven to be accurate. The money junkies were playing fast and loose with these other people's gold. Now they're stuck. And of course,
how long do you think they can do it? I mean, there's 300 pieces of paper for every ounce of gold, you know.
Yeah, it's hopelessly leveraged. Well, you know what's going to happen. As soon as the U.S. government succeeds in taking our guns, they're going to come for our silver and gold, because they did it back in 1933. They won't hesitate to do it again the instant they think they can get away with it. We have to take a break for commercials. Thank you very much for the phone call, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And before we go back to the phone, somebody just sent me an article from the Russian media near Volgograd. It's from the 22nd, just 2 days ago, where a Russian individual, actually 5 people were injured when an unexploded bomb from World War II detonated. Apparently they were digging some earthworks for a railroad. They hit the bomb. It blew up. That's what they're dealing with. The people of Europe are living with the aftermath of 2 world wars. Obviously, they don't want a third one. Americans don't have a comprehension what it's like to have those constant reminders around you. I hope they don't find out. I think they're about to. All right, we're going to grab a phone call. Carrie in Florida, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. I'm calling regarding your the last caller that was talking about the gold, and you said they will. The plan may be to confiscate our gold like they did in the 30s.
Yes.
Once they get the weapons, I don't think they're going to be able to get our weapons, brother.
Well, you know, at this point, they're in a panic here. Between Wall Street and Washington, D.C., and this descent into fascism, they have painted themselves into a hideous corner, which ultimately the history of every single fascist nation, they're all short-lived. They're not designed to last for a long time. They're designed to loot and plunder the people. Then the government system collapses, and all the people who profited from it take their money and they ski-daddle on down to South America or something like that. And that's exactly what's happening here. But, at some point, we know that Obama has already advertised that his top priority for his final year in office is going to be disarm the American people.
Well, given the fact that maybe 2% of us know about Solzhenitsyn and about waiting in the doorways with hammers and I think Americans are different than the rest of the world, Michael. I think we know this. And 3% or 2%, I don't think they're going to be able to get them, brother. I think the people give up. Of course, I have heard tell there are Russian/Chinese here to do the dirty work, but they may give up as well. But, I don't think they're going to give it up, and Americans like me will die in our doorways or die down the street to make sure this won't happen. We know history, brother.
Well, I hope it doesn't come to that. I mean, I absolutely am opposed to the idea of a violent revolution in this country. Unfortunately, I'm concerned we're going to get one anyway. I've been very unsuccessful in stopping World War III. I don't think I'm going to be any more successful stopping an American revolution. And as is always the case in these situations, the wrong people wind up being killed and crippled. And that's why I don't think it's a good idea. I still think that if we all stay calm, we don't riot, the blacks and whites go back to shaking hands and hugging each other, and we don't give this government an excuse to declare a national emergency, then they are going to collapse the way the Soviet Union did. But we can see all over our country right now how they're trying to kick up any kind of a fuss that would justify a national emergency. Terror attacks in multiple cities, race riots across the country. They've been trying to fan up race riots for years now, and it hasn't happened yet because America's black people are just as smart as America's white people and recognize a government setup when they see one.
Amen. I totally agree with that, and that's why I don't think they're going to come. They're not going to come knocking on the doors.
I certainly hope you're right. I certainly hope you're right, because I put a lot of work into building that Hawken gun, and I'd like to hang on to it. It's not exactly a terrorist or a crime weapon, it's a muzzle loader, boom, 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 but, I'm rather proud of that. I put a lot of work into that thing.
Yeah, well, I enjoy your show, Michael. I just wanted a little clarification there, and I don't think it's going to, I don't think we have to worry about them coming for the guns. I mean, we
need to worry constantly about what this government is thinking of doing. And regardless of whether it happens or not, we've seen the agenda. The government clearly is thinking about disarming the American people, even as they use our tax money to give military weapons to the drug cartels down in Mexico, not to mention arming all the terrorists all over the world. But they want us completely disarmed. And I'm sure that there is a plan to reduce us to a cashless society. We've been hearing about that. And the only way a cashless society is going to work is if gold and silver as a store of value are banned at the same time.
I see. You're so smart to listen to, and I make it a point every evening to listen to you. I learn so much every day. I don't know how you can work your brain in overdrive for 3 freaking straight hours, brother, and I thank you for your show. And
coffee.
I'm off.
Lots of coffee. All right, thanks an awful lot, Kerry. We're going to let you go here. And, the whole point of the cashless society is so that all the wealth is the property of the banks, and they will deign to let you have a little bit of your own money when you need it. But the idea is, if there's a cashless society, there's no way to have a run on the bank. All you can do is use your plastic card to move the money from one bank to the other, and if they need to, they'll shift it back. But that only works if you're not allowed to go to a coin dealer with your plastic card and say, give me as many silver and gold coins as there's room on this card to buy. And so when they establish a cashless society, they're going to have to ban private ownership of gold and silver investment coins and platinum and tantalum and the rest of it, even the copper. Somebody sent me a nice copper coin the other day. They're going to have to make all of that illegal because a cashless society only works when there is no store of value that the people can access. One has to follow the other. If they go to a cashless society, people are going to empty their accounts and stock portfolio. They're going to buy silver and gold. It has to be banned to make the cashless agenda work. Now then, getting on back to the Paris attacks. We all know it was a hoax and a fraud. All of these named suspects that we were told are suicide bombers and fanatical Muslim terrorists have turned out to be bar owners, party girls. She liked to send naked pictures of herself in bubble baths around to her friends. The so-called mastermind was doing drugs and drinking whiskey. It's just like Muhammad Atta, the evil mastermind of 9/11. Turned out he was living with a stripper, was also heavily into alcohol and drugs. These are not dedicated Muslims. All their friends and families, they're not religious. They didn't go to the mosque. They didn't go celebrate Ramadan. They're patsies. Just like Lee Harvey Oswald was a patsy. Like James Earl Ray was a patsy. Like that Polish gentleman they shot and killed at the Gleiwitz radio station was a patsy. That's how these things are done. And it's all coming apart. And it's having a backlash. The false flag attack in Paris is now convincing the British people that maybe joining the European Union isn't such a good idea. And it's shifting the polls away from merging with the EU. And of course, Cameron is just screaming like crazy because, you know, his job is to bring the Great Britain firmly into the grip of the European Central Bank. And the Paris terror attacks have turned that around. All righty. Let's see. I'm going to skip on down because we're running out of time here. Let's see. The OSCE coordinator says Kiev should pay pensions to residents of the East Ukraine conflict zone. Oh, yeah, that's going to happen real soon. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian military are once again shelling Donetsk western outskirts, violation of the Minsk Accord. Now, Russia is about to shut off natural gas to Kiev because Kiev is not paying their bill, and because of the Crimea blockade, both food and electricity that has now been put in place, Russia may stop selling coal to Ukraine as well. What Ukraine is doing to Crimea right now is an echo of the Soviet Union blockade of East Berlin to starve them into surrendering their own government and going back into the grip of the tyrant. When it was East Berlin, the world mounted a blockade to supply East Berlin until the Soviet Union backed down. What do they do with Crimea? Same thing they do with Gaza. Absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. Natalia Starozoko is saying Donbass will be Ukraine or a desert. So they're cranking up the war rhetoric there as well. Ukraine, Syria, almost doesn't matter. We can see they're trying to get a full-on global war going. And in my calculated opinion, the United States is going to lose this one, even if it goes to nuclear weapons. That's why we should all oppose it. Going to take a break for news and commercials. We'll be back with Tony Rook, the producer-filmmaker for Incontrovertible, after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And joining us on the phone is, Skype actually, Tony Rook, all the way from Great Britain. And if you remember the name, it's because Tony had a little bit of a disagreement with the British Broadcasting Corporation. So, Tony, thank you for spending time with us today. And before we get into your documentary, why don't you briefly recap your disagreement with the BBC?
Oh, hi, Mike. How are you doing?
Doing fine.
Yeah, no. If people over there don't understand the issue with the BBC, in England you have this ludicrous law where you have to pay £140 a year to watch the television. It's called a TV license fee, and you can't watch the TV without having one, not legally anyway. And because I'd woken up to 9/11 and realised that the BBC were lying to us about it, I refused to pay it. And so I went to court and showed the judge the information on the BBC broadcasting the collapse of Building 7 23 minutes before it occurred. And that was just one instance. They actually broadcasted before that as well. I refused to pay it and showed a bunch of evidence in court. And the judge turned around and effectively agreed with me and didn't fine me, didn't convict me, and so today I terrible criminal that I am, I watch the TV without a TV license. So there you go.
Oh, you horrible, dangerous criminal. The civilization will collapse. But, your case attracted a huge amount of attention here in the United States of America because we are all aware that not only BBC, but Fox News and CNN all reported the collapse of World Trade Center Building 7 23 to 25 minutes before it actually happened, which pretty much tells us everybody was following a script and somebody got off the timeline, probably the person with the detonator for World Trade Center 7. And what's really interesting, of course, is that BBC has no explanation for their amazing presence and even went out and said, well, you know, we threw away all the raw videotapes from that day, so we don't know what happened. And anybody who's worked in broadcast news understands what a joke that is. When you are covering a major historic event, you keep all that raw video because it is a source of revenue. You'll be licensing out and that video for decades to come. And for BBC to claim they just threw it all away, that's absolute complete nonsense here. Now then, let's get on to your new documentary. It's called Incontrovertible. It's a huge one, and please tell us about it.
Well, really, following on from the case, Mike, I come from a fairly well policed background. My father was a forensic detective. My sister was a police officer. My brother-in-law was a police officer. And it's always occurred to me that whenever you approach the subject to 9/11, or if you protest the subject to 9/11 in the court or on the streets, whatever, or protest war, as we did in England, 1.5 million people protested the war in Iraq, you're always going to be met by this blue line of police officers or green line of soldiers, whatever, who are nice people. I've got nothing against them at all, protecting the government. And I think really that if we can persuade them that what they're being told is not true, then maybe we have half a chance of changing things around. So the film really is directed at them. A lot of the information in the film, many 9/11 truthers, for want of a better word, will know the information in it. There's a little bit of new stuff in there as well. But all the information in the film is seen through and spoken about by police officers, soldiers, firefighters, some senior politicians, judges. So hopefully when police officers and the like will watch the film, they will realize that it's their people talking. So it's no longer people like Dylan Avery or myself or Alex Jones or people like yourself. These are law enforcers. These are people who have studied evidence and know how to investigate a crime. And so I hope it's the first film that really contains nothing but them talking about it. And hopefully when, you know, their colleagues watch it, it's a different dynamic just to watch the film. That's what I think, and I hope anyway, Mike.
Well, it is, a huge work. It's very, very finely detailed, and we're running an ad for this movie at WhatReallyHappened.com, where you can click and go in and buy the DVD of it. And I think you said there's a Blu-ray coming.
Yeah, the Blu-ray. I mean, DVDs are great, but they're standard definition video. The Blu-ray is very crisp and lovely, and it's straight off the timeline of the edit. And the idea of the film is maybe that hopefully people will show it in their town halls, their places of worship, wherever they worship, or in the privacy of their own home, and just show it to people. Everyone is friends with the cop, you know. Everyone's friends with someone in the army or the fire service. We all know people like them, and it is directly aimed at them. It's not for 9/11 truthers. 9/11 truthers will know all this information, most of it anyway. This is specifically aimed at these people, and hopefully it's a film for the community more than anything else. The Blu-ray is for projection on a big screen, and we've shown it in a couple of places in England now. We showed it at a university in Preston recently. And a lot of students there didn't know anything about 9/11. All their hands went up at the beginning when we said how many people believe the official story. At the end of the film, nobody's hands went up. So that's the idea.
Well, it sounds like it's very effective, and of course, it makes a great Christmas gift, as we head into the Christmas shopping season. Yeah. It'll fit into that little stocking there. And at this point, it is very urgent for those of us who know the truth about what's been going on in this country and around the world for the last 13, 14 years. Now's the time for outreach to other people, because my experience is the public at large distrust the government, distrust the corporate media. They are asking questions. We need to, all of us, be there to provide answers. And having materials like this DVD or the Blu-ray or any of the printouts from the website to show people gently, don't overwhelm them, is going to get that message out. And we already know the polls are showing that the majority of Americans do not believe the official story of 9/11. The U.S. government is out there, trying to call us all 9/11 deniers, like climate deniers. That's the new smear word. You're a denier. You're denying what we say. Yeah, we are, because we've got you lying to us so many times here. And it sounds. Do you have? How much more do you want to share with our listeners? We're coming up on a commercial break here.
Well, really, just to I don't think the film is up there. It will be free, available online soon. But really, just watch it and just share it with friends who are in the armed forces, the police, or the firefighters. They're the three we're really going for. And if they can get it to them, then I in my naivety, think it will make a difference. That's all I could say, really.
I'm sure that it will, because right now, again, the public at large, they're open and receptive to the idea that they have been lied to about so many things. I mean, Saddam's nuclear weapons was a very clumsy lie, and with its exposure, that was a watershed moment where certainly the majority of Americans said, oh my goodness, our government lies to us. And if they lied to us about this to start a war, what else are we being lied to about? And people going back study, they find out about the USS Maine wasn't sunk by a Spanish mine. There were no torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin. The Lusitania was carrying weapons. Pearl Harbor was not a surprise. And now they're willing to look at virtually everything they've ever been taught in the state schools and on the corporate media. They're asking questions. And those who maintain the lies, whose political fortunes rest on the lies, they're in an absolute panic here. I actually got called an anti-Semite by Glenn Greenwald. I'm going to have to respond to that, in the next day or two. So I know you're very tired. It's, almost midnight where you are here. And so I think we're going to go ahead and let you go at this point. But the link to your video is up at WhatReallyHappened.com, and I'm hoping people are going to go on in and pick it up as a good Christmas present for this holiday season. We'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show, and we've got some developing stories here. There's just been a 7.5 quake hit the Peru-Brazil border, and I'm sure we're going to be hearing more about that. Not exactly the greatest quake-proof building standards in that part of the world. There is no tsunami threat to the Pacific, so we don't have to worry about that here. Now, the State Department, trying to sort out this mess between Syria, Turkey, and Russia, has come out with an absolute absurd rationalization. Okay, Mark Toner, spokesdrone for the State Department, has come out with a statement. Turkey and the rebels Turkey backs in northern Syria have the right to defend themselves against Russian airstrikes, but the Syrian government itself does not have a right to defend itself against strikes by the U.S. and France. That's completely absurd. Everybody has a right to self-defense. What's going on here right now is they're having to somehow make it look like Turkey was okay to shoot down the Russian plane over Syria. And they're still trying to sell you this idea that there's good terrorists and there's bad terrorists. And Russia shouldn't go after the good terrorists that we gave all that money to overthrow the legitimate government of Syria and put in a U.S. puppet. Even people who are not paying attention to all this stuff are looking at this, listening to this, and saying, this doesn't make any sense at all. It is clear that what's been going on in Syria for the last going on 5 years is yet another in a long series of U.S. overthrows of legitimate governments to be replaced by U.S. puppet rulers. They've been doing it at least since the end of World War II. They've tried 50 times. They're batting about 500. And they got away with it because people didn't understand that's what was going on. They think, oh, it's a popular revolution going on in my country. Things will get better. Then they get worse. And they didn't understand why until now. Now, Sputnik News has already picked up the story about how back in 2012, Turkey sent an aircraft into Syrian airspace, and it was shot down. And Erdogan said, look, a single incursion does not justify an attack. A double standard compared to his actions today, where the Russian plane theoretically violated the Turkish security buffer extension of their border for a total of 17 seconds and was shot down. Now, there's another article that's gone on up talking about all the violations of Greece's airspace Turkey has been doing since 2008. Turkey has violated the airspace of Greece no fewer than 2,244 times in 2014 alone. 6 times a day. The hypocrisy is staggering. Apparently there's been another terror attack down in the capital of Tunisia. Bomb went off on a bus. 12 people have been killed. Now down in Yemen, keeping track here, Saudi Arabia has been trying to reconquer Yemen, shackle them back to their U.S. puppet ruler since last March. Still not able to do it. 7,000 people have been killed. Saudi Arabia has been committing outright war crimes to the point where even the government of Great Britain is saying Saudi Arabia needs to be sent to The Hague. They're bombing civilians, non-combatants, non-military facilities. They're bombing hospitals, clinics, schools. Meanwhile, over in Iraq, a Canadian airstrike is alleged to have killed 10 civilians there. Nobody's clean in this mess. Now, over in Israel, a prominent Israeli settler, spokesman out there saying, you know, the illegal settlements should make the illegal settlements legal. We apparently ran over a 16-year-old Palestinian girl, then got out of his car and shot her dead, saying he believed she was planning to do something terrible. Actually, he was upset she probably scratched the paint on his Mercedes. It's amazing. Now, the cooperative bank has gone on a campaign of shutting down the bank accounts of supporters of Palestine. The Palestinian Solidarity Campaign's account has been shut down, along with another 20 other organizations. The bank's excuse is they don't have an appetite for risk, and they will not elaborate any further. Obviously, somebody made a phone call saying shut down their finances. It's getting embarrassing. Here in the United States of America, and this ought to get everybody a little bit worried, top Department of Homeland Security officials are advising Jewish communities to initiate or review security maintenance in the wake of the recent terror attacks in Paris. And this is really kind of odd because they haven't called me to tell me to beef up my security around here. Kind of makes you wonder what their priorities are over there. Now, getting on to the economic news, and I realize we're running way behind on our talking points here. It is being reported Deutsche Bank may be declaring bankruptcy very soon. And it's going to be a huge cascade. The Federal Reserve yesterday had an unscheduled closed-door meeting, and it's kind of weird they described it as that because Federal Reserve meetings are always closed doors. This time, I guess they closed 3 or 4 sets of doors. And the word is the Federal Reserve is trying to figure out what they're going to do when Deutsche Bank declares bankruptcy and the whole system starts crashing down here. Now, last week I reported the Baltic Dry Index had fallen to an all-time low. I was then corrected on it, saying it was actually a little bit lower last February. I shouldn't have worried too long because today it has crashed to an all-time low. And that's a red warning flag, that everything is grinding to a halt because the money junkies have taken so much money out of the system can't function any longer. Russia and Indonesia are getting rid of the dollar. Don't want to have anything to do with it, but they're trading directly in their native currencies. The BRICS Bank does not have a single currency. They're allowing the member nations to trade directly with each other with their own indigenous currencies. There is no standard currency they have to go through. And this is a big reason why all the BRICS nations are on the U.S. government's special high-interest targets list. According to an article over in Zero Hedge, consumer confidence crashes to 14-month lows, which is telegraphing, yes, it's going to be a terrible retail holiday shopping season. Nobody has any money. Nobody has any money. getting into politics, Carcinocchio, it's a good name for him, has now backed off his comments that he saw Muslims cheering on 9/11. His campaign announced Carson is not standing behind that statement anymore, which is another way of saying they caught him in another lie. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And we're going to talk about Donald Trump here. Now, not too long ago, Donald Trump signed an agreement with the leadership of the GOP that he would not run as an independent. He would throw his support behind whoever won the GOP primaries. But there were conditions on that deal. It wasn't just Donald Trump who was obligated to a certain course of action. It was also the GOP leadership, and it is very obvious at this point the GOP leadership has reneged on the deal. And one issue that is seriously concerning is that a former official of the GOP party leadership, acting independently, so don't blame the Republicans, has formed his own political action group, an LLC, with the avowed purpose of getting Donald Trump out of the race. So Trump is basically waking up and realizing that whereas trust in your counterparty is an essential necessity for business, it is a liability in the world of politics. And Trump is now basically saying that as far as he's concerned, because the GOP did not keep their half of that agreement, he does not feel he is bound by it. In other words, he is back to saying that if the GOP leadership continues to try and eject him from the race, that he is perfectly willing to mount a third-party candidacy. Now, the GOP is justifying their ejection of Donald Trump by saying Donald Trump candidacy guarantees Hillary will win. Well, the poll numbers do not show that. I'm being DOS'd again. The poll numbers do not show that. In matchups between Trump and Hillary, Trump continues to win. In fact, Hillary is struggling against, quite a few of the GOP potential candidates, but mostly against Donald Trump. She doesn't want to run against Donald Trump. She wants to run against Ben Carson. She can beat Ben Carson. Same strategy Nixon used in his reelection, to basically go on out and, sabotage all the Democrats except George McGovern, because he could beat George McGovern. If you have never read the book or seen the movie, All the President's Men, that's your homework for the holiday weekend. So what's going on here is the GOP wants Trump out. The Democrats want Trump out. He's got his own money. He can't be bought. He's a president who will not be under the control of the money junkies or Israel or the military-industrial complex. And that's a danger to the system. And so with the formation of this political action group, political action committee, being run by a former executive of the GOP, Trump is understanding. The GOP went back on their word. Ooh, big shock there. And again, I like Donald Trump. Don't agree with everything he says. I like Donald Trump, but he is dangerously politically naive about the inner workings of the U.S. government. So now the threat of an independent campaign is rearing its head. Trump's got enough money to carry it. I'd support him in an independent campaign. He could win. He could actually win as an independent candidate. And not only would it upset the money junkies' apple cart in Wall Street and Washington, D.C., it would break the monopoly of the two traditional parties, and that would be a wonderful thing. So, anyway. Let's see. Political fairy tale gone bad. Merkel's stately aura fades. In the wake of this whole immigration controversy, Angela Merkel's star is beginning to fade. She's on the wane. People have lost trust in her. It's one of the costs of this botched immigration policy. Now then, here in the United States of America, as I mentioned before in the show, there is a concerted effort to fan up white versus black tension. And this is a replay of what the COINTELPRO program did back in the 1960s, deliberately fanning up racial tension to divide the American people so they could not unite against the war in Vietnam or other abuses by the federal government. They played this trick before and it worked. This time we're better educated. We don't have an excuse to fall for it. But we're seeing all this nonsense out there. Story over in Front Page Magazine, where there is this professor at the University of Colorado. She's an education professor. Shirley E. Matthias is out there saying that whiteness is a disease. If you are white, you have a disease. That's the kind of hate mongering that's coming out under the guise of empowerment and racial justice. Another story coming out of WorldNet Daily, a Columbia University student is claiming she is being traumatized by being forced to read about white fictional characters. I'm traumatized by reading about Robin Hood. I'm traumatized reading about Captain Ahab. He's always after that white whale. I can just see this person trying to get a real job with that on the transcripts. Refuse to read literature, traumatized by the fact that these are white characters. Now then, not too long ago, there were 5 Black Lives Matter protesters shot in Minneapolis. Black Lives Matter were claiming the shooting was an unprovoked attack by white supremacists. And as usual, the video has finally surfaced and shows, once again, it's a hoax. There is a video, and it's linked to the front page of WhatReallyHappened.com, that reveals this Black Lives Matter mob attacked 3 white people who were doing nothing but shooting video of the protest. They attacked these citizen journalists 3 times, and only on the 3rd time did they respond in self-defense. Somebody is out there trying to provoke race riots in multiple cities because then they can declare a national state of emergency. Meanwhile, the Obama administration, which doesn't have enough money for our injured veterans or for our legal citizens who are homeless and hungry, has spent your tax dollars releasing a welfare guide printed in 14 different languages to help refugees and immigrants collect taxpayer-funded handouts. Going to bring them all in, give them free stuff. They'll be guaranteed to vote Democratic next year, even though legally they're not supposed to vote. That's the scam going on over there. Story coming out of the New York Daily News. 150 people on a flight from Mexico were allowed to disembark at JFK Airport without even going through customs. Just shown off the airplane, go have fun. Now, going on back to the Kennedy assassination, we just had the 52nd anniversary of that this last weekend. The granddaughter of Orville Nix is now suing the government for $10 million over the movie that her grandfather shot of the JFK assassination that was lost by government investigators. Now, we've all seen the Zapruder film, but Orville Nix was on the other side of the street shooting Kennedy's limousine, and in the background was the grassy knoll. And this film would have been the best evidence to determine whether or not there was, in fact, a shoot team behind that picket fence, but the government just lost that movie. Oh, gee whiz, we'll never know. There's nothing new with this, okay? When Robert Kennedy was assassinated, there was a young man, Jamie Scott Enyart, he works in visual effects now, took the only known photographs of the moment when Kennedy was actually being shot. Enyart turned over the film to police with the assurance it would be returned, but the film never was. The official investigation claimed Enyart's photos did not show anything, and so Enyart wanted his negatives returned as they had commercial value. Then the state of California claimed the negatives had been lost. After waiting for years for them to be found, Enyart sued the state of California for the assumed value of the historical negatives, at which point the negatives were found in the state archives. A courier carried the envelope with the negatives down to Los Angeles to deliver them, but the rental car had a flat tire. He stopped at a gas station, went to the bathroom, and golly gee shuckies, somebody stole the case out of the car with the negatives. See how this all works? We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be back with the last segment of our program after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And somebody does not like me because my server is now under a massive denial of service attack. Well, when you're catching flack, you're over the target. Obviously, somebody somewhere is very, very concerned about what's going on. They can't lie to the people anymore. And if they can't lie with impunity, I mean, that's the whole core of their power, if you think about it. So, anyway, before we get any further into this segment here, I do want to remind everybody, we're in the Thanksgiving week, and our overworked and greatly underpaid technical staff are taking the next 3 days off, and so am I. They're going to be repeat shows from last week, tomorrow, Thursday, and Friday. And frankly, well, we all need the rest. It's been a year since I took any significant time away from the radio show, and I got things I want to be working on. But I will be maintaining the site in case something does go bang on Thanksgiving. And thank you for your patience and understanding, and I hope you all have a wonderful, safe Thanksgiving dinner, Thanksgiving holiday, watch the sporting events and so forth here. Now, getting on to the last few news stories today. Interesting story came out from newsforge.com. According to Pew Research Center, they have found that more than 1 out of every 4 Americans believe government has become the enemy of the American people. 27%. That's up 8 points since 1996. Now, we ran the same poll on WhatReallyHappened.com, and we had 99% come in and say, yeah, the U.S. government has become the enemy of the American people. And it's not just the American people. The U.S. government has become the enemy of everything the United States is supposed to stand for. They've become the enemy of the Bill of Rights. They've become the enemy of basic freedoms and liberties. They have turned into the Fourth Reich, constant spying on us all, mandates, dictatorship, constant lies, fraud, and deception, all of the tools of the tyrant. Now then, if you have a Dell laptop, there's been a little bit of a kerfuffle, because apparently the new Dell laptops come with a security certificate already installed called Superfish 2.0. And apparently it leaves the Dell laptops wide open to malicious attacks. Fortunately, there are instructions on how to remove that. They're linked to the front page of WhatReallyHappened.com. Now, apparently, the world's most complex cash register malware plunders millions of dollars in the U.S. It's called ModPOS, for point of sale. And it infects these computer-based cash register systems you see at the supermarket and the department store and everything. They're making millions of dollars, and for some strange reason, the National Security Agency can't seem to find them. Now, the NSA is supposed to be finding all the terrorists and criminals. They never do. But they're certainly going to spy on you and steal your business secrets, make sure you're not thinking those double plus ungood thoughts. And, of course, whacking off to naked pictures of your significant others, your wives, your husbands, your boyfriend, girlfriend, your sons, your daughters. Edward Snowden revealed that. They're building themselves a huge free porn collection out of your personal lives. Now, Yahoo is drawing criticism because it has implemented a system in Yahoo Mail where if it detects ad blockers on your web browser, it'll start interfering with your mail. Now, a Yahoo spokesman said this is just a test, but it tells you the way they're thinking. The online advertisers hate ad blockers, and yet we're being told by people like Edward Snowden that online advertising has become a major route for the delivery of malware. So Yahoo's attitude is, we don't care if you're being infected with malware, you will see our ads or we will deny you mail service. Sort of gives you a perspective on how these big IT companies think about us. They could care less if we're being infected with malware. In fact, it's good for business because you have to buy malware software. Now, the other day we were talking about the iPad Pro, which apparently has a little bit of a problem, where when you plug it into the wall to charge, it can on occasion freeze up entirely, requiring a hard restart. And it turns out the problems don't end there. Story out of ZDNet. The iPad Pro was aimed at enterprise sales, businesses to interact with their corporate IT structure. And it turns out it's not selling very well. It's a very heavy tablet, and executives are saying, if I'm going to carry around something this heavy, I'm going to get a full-on laptop. Or stick with the smaller iPads, which are very, very convenient. So all of a sudden, the venerable Apple is making some very poor decisions. The iWatch isn't doing very well. It doesn't really add functionality. It just moves it from your smartphone to your wrist. And it's really very expensive. Volkswagen has admitted to equipping Audis and Porsches with another illegal piece of software to defeat or to alter test results. When it's being tested, you give it this thing. When it's being driven, you give it power and zip and verve that the customers want. Human-caused global warming. It's a very snowy weekend. If you're in the snow zone, please drive carefully. Actually found this article from 1941 that was talking, even then, global warming, the world is warming, and actually blamed global warming for the rise of Adolf Hitler and Benito Mussolini. So even back then in the 1940s, they were just out there fear-mongering global warming, and it's causing all these bad things. I saw this wonderful story over at West Side Today. Record high temperatures and snow in Southern California forecast. Do they not understand the contradiction there? There's going to be snow coming down, but get that message out. It's record high temperatures. Because Barack Obama needs his carbon taxes. He needs to go into the Paris Climate Summit and get his global hegemonic control over the world's economy. So even as the snow comes pouring down, keep reminding everybody, it's record high temperatures out there. This last weekend snowstorm was one of Chicago's worst November storms ever. Major disruptions in travel around the Midwest. 11.2 inches in Chicago. Midwest snowfalls totals up to 19 inches. This is not only setting records, we're just getting into this winter, and it's already breaking 100-year-old records. And it's going to get worse. And the corporate media can be counted on to go on out there and say, oh my goodness, we've got, hottest year on record. NOAA is still stonewalling over their report claiming there's been no pause in global warming. They're now screaming that Congress is harassing them. They're harassing us. They won't take our word for it. Nobody should take anybody's word in the government or the corporate media. Haven't you been lied enough to know that? You should never accept anything coming out of the government or corporate media at face value. It's somebody's agenda. Somebody wants your obedience, your money, your loyalty, your vote. That's what it's all about. I got an email early today from somebody whose sister went to get the flu shot, arms swelled up horribly, almost had to go to the hospital, and that came in right after this story where a 9-year-old Texas girl got the flu shot. 2 days later, paralyzed from the waist down and blind. Now, we've been talking about all these holistic doctors who are all of a sudden dying under strange circumstances. And one of the theories put on out there was they had discovered a cure for cancer, which would destroy the cancer industrial complex. There's a new theory out there now that these doctors were about to go public having discovered that the nagalase enzyme protein is intentionally being added to all vaccines. And nagalase stops vitamin D from binding to the GC protein, stripping the human body of its natural ability to kill cancer cells. Nagalase is a protein that's created by cancer cells, and it's found in high concentrations of autistic children, and they're putting this in the vaccines, and apparently these doctors were about to go public on it. We have reached the stage of fascism, where they're deliberately making us ill to get more money out of us. There's the music. Have a happy Thanksgiving vacation, and we'll be back next Monday here on the Genesis Communication Network. So stay safe, stay skeptical, stay informed, make good choices, and aloha, America.